What's up, gamers? Aaron Shack here, and we are here with a live reaction video. I wanted to do one on this because I think this video hits at something that is a key aspect of what is happening in gaming, whether it's a plus or a minus at times. We're going to get into that and talk about the nuance and the depth to this issue, because it's not simply an issue like DEI bad or DEI good. Like it's obviously a very nuanced conversation that needs to be had on this issue. Okay, that looks a little better. Okay, so yeah, today we are doing a live react to a video by a creator, Legendary Drops, and it's called The Real Impact of DEI in Gaming. So we're going to react to this. We're going to answer questions in chat. You want to chime in, be a part of the conversation. DEI is short for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think probably the video will explain a little bit more of like what it means and how it's been utilized in games. And we'll pause at certain points during the video and have little discussion points. And of course, once the video's over, we can have like an open Q&A at the end. Because it is like a 28-minute video, so I mean, you know, it probably is going to take us a while to get through it, but
oh boy, I guess we're doing this.
Here we go.
I've tried to do my best to navigate the waters of social sensitivity, but there is so much intellectual dishonesty on both sides of the aisle that very little progress is ever made, and oftentimes genuine criticism is lost in translation. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has very much become the boogeyman that is haunting the video game industry, slowly eroding our...
Okay, first off, loved Iron Maiden shirt, one of my favorite metal bands.
Our trust and interest in a lot of games. And it's penetrated discussions around the quality of games, character designs, narratives, heck, even how we play games in the first place. And these are all valid...
Definitely earned it. DEI.
No. Criticisms to make, because at the end of the day, we're buying a video game, not a social manifesto.
Hang on, let's go back. We're buying a video game, not a social manifesto.
Today, we're buying a video game, not a social manifesto. I want more people to feel like they belong, because they do belong. From my perspective, regardless of your nationality, gender, or identity, you're a gamer in my eyes. This isn't about not wanting people in games. This is about...
We talked about this a little last night, but I'm going to rehash it a little bit. Because, yeah, he goes back here and talks about... regardless of your nationality, gender, identity, all these various things, like none of that matters when you're on like the gaming playing field, right? Like if we're in a match of Call of Duty, it doesn't matter what you look like or where you're from or what country you are or what gender you are. Like we're all on the same team, or maybe we're on opposing teams, but regardless, we're just there to game and have fun. So there are always going to be like racist and bigoted people. So I mean, you are going to get people that are going to say crazy things and that are going to be hateful towards you. But that is unfortunately just kind of a fact of life. But I think he's onto something already right here, where it's like he's not against the idea that we need diversity and inclusion, stuff like that in gaming. Not every character needs to be a white male protagonist, right? So
you're a gamer in my eyes. This isn't about not wanting people in games. This is about being sick and tired of watching companies commoditize people's identities and then go and use them as a shield for bad products. I'm sick of it. While social responsibility and representation is important, at the end of the day, the transaction that's happening is for engagement, entertainment, and enjoyment, and that's being lost. Today, what I want to do is I want to talk about the real impacts of DEI in gaming. What it is, what it's doing, and where it's going. Video games have always been a controversial medium, partly because they cater to such a wide variety of audiences. Historically, games have been made for children, teens, and adults, which naturally invites conflict and criticism. You have games for all kinds of people, regardless of age, race, gender, or identity, all with different interests, preferences, and expectations. This creates a wide range of opinions and voices about what games should be and what they represent, and oftentimes, those opinions clash. Games are also divided by genre, making the industry...
Also, I've been watching gameplay of this Sonic X Shadow Generations, and this might be the first, like, 3D Sonic banger in, like, How long has it been since Sonic Adventure 2? Like 20 years. Or actually, let's actually since Sonic Mania, I would say. I would say Sonic Mania was the, and I enjoy some aspects of Frontiers. I guess this discussion's neither here nor there. I just want to point out this game and the level design looks like it's finally back on point for like 3D Sonics. So.
Anyway. Even more fragmented. You got players that love action games, role-playing games, sports simulations, or fighting games. All of these different types of players that are coming to the table with different needs and desires. And when games tackle touchy subjects like violence or sexuality, the controversy only grows. Take, for example, Grand Theft Auto with its portrayal of crime and violence, or the Dead or Alive series with its over-the-top sexualized characters. These games have sparked outrage not just from players, but from outside groups like parents, politicians, and media pundits. Many of whom don't even play video games, but still have strong opinions, assuming that all games are made for kids. But as the industry has grown, so has its core audience. Many of the people that started playing games as kids are now adults, and they're expecting more mature and complex content. However, as these companies are now seeking to widen their audiences and maximize their profits, they've started to blur the line between who games are made for, which is causing even more friction. Games that were once aimed at a specific group now try to appeal to everyone, and this can result in a mess of conflicting ideas, especially when it comes to the growing influence of diversity, equity, and inclusion in video games.
Right.
Today, DEI has become a hot topic in gaming. We see it in discussions around the failures of games like Concord and Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, where forced inclusivity and awkward character designs have been called out by fans and critics alike.
Okay, so he hits at something really important here. Concord and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League have something, and this phrase can be often misused at times, forced diversity. What does that mean? Because to someone who might be like a racist or a bigot, like everything is forced, you know? all that is forced for them. But I think to the average person, the average consumer, when we see something that is forced, we know it's inauthentic. So it could be something like how Deadshot was originally a white character in the Arkham games, and then all of a sudden in this game he's an African American character, right? Now, they may have made justifications in the lore. It didn't offend me, by the way. Doesn't offend me. Had no problem. Okay, I had no problem playing as, like, Deadshot's my favorite character to play as, right? Like, I love him. So, I had no problem with it, but we know when something doesn't pass the sniff test, right? And we'll get more into, like, what forced diversity is. I just want to make sure that you guys kind of bookmark that term and understand that, at least in the way I'm using it, I also think that Legendary Drops is not using it as any sort of, like, racist dog whistle or what have you. But let's go back.
We see it in discussions around the failures of games like Concord and Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, where forced inclusivity and awkward character designs.
And we talked about, on previous Shackcast episodes, we have talked about Concord's horrible designs, right? Where it's like they're using colors that don't mix together, that don't match color theory, and are not related on the color wheel. There's certain colors that don't go together, like gray and orange and, I don't know, like teal or something. You know, you put like the brown, you know, just putting like gray and brown and orange all together, like, you know, just colors that don't lend themselves to each other, right? Like blue and yellow work really well together, right? The colors of Best Buy. Purple and yellow, the Lakers, those colors work well. McDonald's, Burger King, all these restaurants, red and yellow, it incites hunger, it incites passion, right? So there's colors that work together, red, white, and blue, right? Makes you think of America. Makes you think of patriotism. They're three colors that naturally fit together no matter what country it is. Green, white, and red, it's kind of the same thing. It could be Mexico, it could be Italy, it could be, you know, Christmas time. It evokes all sorts of feelings, right? But if you do, like, green, brown, and orange, like, all of a sudden we're not, those colors aren't lending themselves. And when they talk about awkward character designs, it's them designing characters that we don't want to play as, right? So, for example, we had the fat guy in Overwatch, right? Roadhog, right? So they designed a character that was fat, right? Normally, you would want to play as someone who is maybe athletic or sleek. In a shooting type of game, you want to be someone that is physically fit or whatever, but Overwatch has a wide diversity of characters, right? Different races, different nationalities, all these various things. And to include someone who is fat, but also give them, like, you know, a certain form of agency in the world, there's plenty of people that love to play as Roadhog, and nobody gets worried about his design or him being fat or something like that, because it's not forced, right? But when all the characters are characters that you're like, ugh, I don't want to play as any of these because the designs don't fit. They just feel like you're just trying to uglify literally every character. We can't have a single good-looking male or female or whatever it may be, you know? Deadshot switch was jarring, but not as much as making Ivy a kid. Yeah, the Ivy thing bugs me a little bit. This is kind of a little outside the discussion, but I like it. But Ivy, so, you know, spoilers for Arkham Knight here if you haven't played the game, but in Batman Arkham Knight, Poison Ivy dies. She gives her life so that Gotham and the future of the city can live, right? She dies a hero in a way. And what happens at the end of Arkham Knight is that, you know, we thought she was dead, but she grows back as a little sprout, just comes out, right? And so I think this game is sort of saying, like, hey, that sprout grew up into, like, a little kid. She's obviously aging at a rate that's, you know, not super crazy. Yeah, exactly. Jay's like, but yeah, you can tune back in and get this spoiler discussion here later. Once you need to play the Arkham games, I would say. So that's what I got there. You're good. We're back in. But yeah, there's a reason why Ivy is the way she is. I don't like it, but like story-wise, lore-wise, it makes sense. I know she's annoying as a kid in this game, and there's a lot of like awkward dialogue between her and Ivy, because usually between Ivy and Harley Quinn, because usually they are like some sort of couple or friendship type thing going on, and it can't really happen in this context because that would be wrong. And they kind of poke fun at it in the game, and it really comes across as cringe. Okay, so anyway, let's get back to this.
Have been called out by fans and critics alike. Now, all eyes are on the upcoming Dragon Age: The Veilguard, which many fear could be the next casualty of heavy-handed DEI influence. Fans that worry about the game, like others before it, will fall.
I will say,
DEI
Dragon Age Veilguard,
fans that worry,
like all the character designs kind of look horrendous, and it looks like they're trying to do like a Marvelification of like character designs and the awkward, like, oh no, I'm a everyday person just like you, and so it doesn't really capture the fantasy aspect. It's trying to be like Borderlands meets Dragon Age, right? And that type of humor and that type of it just doesn't lend itself well. An eco teen, yeah, I think if you had better writers, you could have made Ivy like a teenage, you know, rebellious punk rock eco terrorist type thing, you know. Yeah, Forspoken would be a good example of that. Of her kind of being the Tom Holland, Tony Starkish character, you know, that's constantly making quips and talking to her little bracelet like it's Jarvis, and just making those little humor. It can take you out of it at times. I don't think Forspoken's a bad game, but I do, you know, people called out that type of writing, and, you know, it's not that it's like bad, it's just like overused. And I think in a fantasy context like Dragon Age, it doesn't belong. there's a certain tone that goes with D&D, Dragon Age, fantasy games, medieval games. There's a certain tone that goes with it. And it's not the Borderlands type of humor that I think we're going to get.
Game, like others before it, will fall victim to poorly executed, ham-fisted inclusivity that feels...
And I do feel that this game, everything I've seen on it, it does feel like it has ham-fisted inclusivity. That does feel right. Like it's like bright colors, like everybody's like overly diverse, where it's like where the devs are like trying to point at you. They're kind of trying to say, they're like, look what we did. Look at that. That's an Asian character. Look what we did. There's a token African American character. Oh, look what we did. You know? Like, they're just really trying to. And the thing is, with Dragon Age, it used to be a little bit of a darker fantasy game. It wasn't all like bright, flashy color. It plays the United Nations. I mean, yeah, and it's like, I don't know. This is where we're at. You're gonna grab it now that the hate died down. Yeah, I think Forspoken's underrated. I think people really over-hated it, and I think if I had more time, I would have continued to play it, and I'd have more to say. But honestly, I'm interested in it, because not only does it have a character who is interesting to me, right? She's a poor African-American character trying to make it in New York. That's rough. And then she experiences the Alice in Wonderland effect of, getting pulled to a strange new world and trying to get home and having to, sort of react to this situation. And yeah, does it have that kind of Marvel-y writing to it? Sure. But it didn't really bug me. It didn't really bug me because it's what's popular. And, it can be a little cringe at times, but, like, for the most part, I think there's a good game with good DNA. Like, there's parkour, there's magic attacks. I'm interested in the story. It's something new. It's not an established franchise, right? It's a new IP. It's something different. So, I like that. Whereas with Dragon Age, it does feel like they're trying to, like, distort it into something else that the original games were not.
More like a corporate checkbox than a meaningful addition.
This is big. Corporate checkbox. Let's go back so we get this in context. But corporate checkbox is going to be a big term that we use today.
The game, like others before it, will fall victim to poorly executed, ham-fisted inclusivity that feels more like a corporate checkbox than a meaningful addition to its story and characters. It feels like a lot of these discussions peaked around 2020, which makes a lot of sense. The video game industry has grown exponentially.
So you see it as they're showing each character. Just imagine each one is a checkbox. Yep.
Over the years, overtaking movies, music, and television. And with that came private equity. Most publicly traded companies saw their share prices double during the pandemic, and with that came more investors and fiduciary responsibility. These companies are now expected to grow, not just in projects, but in employees, sales, and audiences. Whereas earlier in this industry's life, they could be casual, jeans at work, gamers making games for gamers. Now the industry leaders need to tighten their tie and show they are worth their money. This brings us to the idea of corporate social responsibility, or CSR, and how DEI fits into that. See, what a lot of people don't talk about is that CSR is the concept that many companies should do more than just chase profits. It's part of their social image to their stakeholders. They're expected to contribute to the greater good by being ethical, environmentally friendly, and socially responsible. DEI is a part of that. On paper, it's about making sure that companies are fair, inclusive, and representative of everyone, and that's not inherently bad. But here's the catch. While CSR and DEI are good in theory, they're often used by corporations to make more money. Governments offer tax breaks, grants, and other financial incentives to companies that follow CSR guidelines, and over time, companies simply just comply to maximize their revenue and avoid fines and potential lawsuits. Right. So instead of implementing DEI initiatives out of a genuine desire for inclusivity, many companies are simply doing it just to get those benefits. This leads to a lot of issues in creative industries because this not only affects their approach to hiring and management, but also their games. leading to games that feel hollow with characters, stories, and designs that seem more focused on meeting corporate goals than delivering a valuable experience.
Yeah. So are we adding diverse characters to our game because that's part of the story that we want to tell? And we have a narrative that we can craft around a character that has that diversity? Or are we doing it just to get, extra tax dollars, get a write-off, or, get some sort of government bonus for just saying, well, we did make Deadshot black. Like, what do you want? So, this is going to be a key part of the issue, is like, we're not against the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, but it's like how it's being done, it's obviously being used as ticking a checkbox, right?
Anyone who's watching this video right now that's like me, who's worked at a company at a corporate level, knows how these companies view CSR or DEI. They don't care about it. They feign it to the public, joke about it behind closed doors, and oftentimes only comply because they are absolutely terrified of HR lawsuits since Me Too, or they just don't want to get bent over by environmental agencies like the EPA or workers' safety and OSHA because those fines are millions of dollars.
Okay, so there is another half of this, which I don't know if we'll have time to really get into the whole, was it the CEO of Sweet Baby sort of threatening all game developers with like, oh, if you don't want to get sued, you'll hire us. Like, we need to make you scared, like so scared that your audience is going to hate you and boycott you, and that you're going to get sued if you don't hire us to consult and make sure that you have a bunch of, racially diverse or gay characters in your game or whatever it may be. Like, that was part of her speech, and I think we can find it on YouTube. But let's table that for now, because it's kind of adjacent to the issue. But I mean, there kind of is in what he's mentioned here, where it's like they are afraid of lawsuits. These corporations, like, they're not adding this diversity because they like it and believe in it. They're doing it because it's either like mandatory, or there's like a bonus to doing it, or they're worried that they're going to get called out by people. And then, like sort of with some games, I think there was a point in time where Overwatch was being called out for not having enough racially diverse characters. Yet it has so many. But because it's not addressing the specific race that you are or that you want to be in the game, Yeah, it's a forced diversity move and everyone loses. Yeah. What's up, TX? How you doing?
Behind closed doors, and oftentimes only comply because they are absolutely terrified of HR lawsuits since Me Too, or they just don't want to get bent over by environmental agencies like the EPA or workers' safety and OSHA because those fines are millions of dollars. It's all a racket. It's a cold corporate response to heavy-handed regulation. As an example, in the US, we have OSHA, and it has a metric that's called TRIR, Total Recordable Injury Rate. It's a made-up score that levies the amount of injuries that you've had in a year and puts it into a pretty little equation and pops out a number. And if construction contractors even want to bid, I'm not even talking about work, I'm just saying bid on work, for most facilities, they have to be below a certain score. When you have companies that are out there that have tens of thousands of employees, accidents are bound to happen. And with such strict rules in place, they often find ways to blame employees, fire injured employees, or hide injuries to be able to protect themselves.
Yep.
Or in most cases, what they do is they lean on consulting companies, a multi-billion-dollar industry of companies that's ran by the self-same people that made the rules in the first place. DEI has its own racket. The DEI consulting industry is valued at $97.2 billion in 2023 and is projected to reach $131.1 billion by 2031. Snake oil.
Let's go back. DEI consulting market size was valued at $97.2 billion in 2023. Is reported to reach $134.1 billion by 2031. That's insane. And, we can argue, I think we will argue that there is a right way of doing DEI consulting. But I think what we've seen so far, it has been the heavy-handed, ham-fisted, forced diversity type stuff.
$1.1 billion
Not in every
by 2031.
circumstance, but a lot
Snake
of them.
oil salesmen
We'll get to
developing new terms and sensitivity training to scare companies into using their services to keep them safe from regulators
Just like the CEO of Sweet Baby Inc. is doing.
and lawsuits. You know, we've seen both games media and consultancy agencies say some pretty outrageous things over the last few years. So I want to ask you this. Do you think that these regulators and these consultancy agencies actually want people to get along? Do you think it really is about sensitivity? Because from my perspective, it looks like division is a very lucrative industry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, right now...
Think about it. Okay, sorry, okay, yeah, that's a better... Got him with the... okay. Okay, so he talks here... I totally lost my train of thought. Okay, diversity... It's almost better... Hang on, let me just hear it again.
Division is a very lucrative industry.
Okay, there it is. That's the point I was trying to get at before I started laughing. Okay, division is a very lucrative industry. Let's think about that for a second. Because it almost is better to have these two factions warring about a game, all right? Let's take like Star Wars Outlaws, for example, right? Like there's a whole half of the audience that goes, female character, she's ugly, I want to play as a Jedi, she's just a regular human scoundrel thief, and she's not even good at it. This game's woke. It's trash. So there's like a whole side of the audience that's there. And then there's a whole other side that's like, no, I love it. It's diversity. It's representation. It's a woman. I love a strong, powerful woman. I love the narrative that is allowing her to grow and learn from being like a bad, horrible scoundrel thief to being a true outlaw. There's respected and revered and maybe potentially feared, right? So we have two sides, right? We have some that, and you could be any, I'm making it very black and white, but you could obviously be anywhere within the spectrum, right? So is it almost better to have a game that is controversial in that way, where there's people making videos about it that love it? There's people making videos about it that hate it. Controversy sells, right? Because it gets people talking about your game. Because if no one talks about your game, then no one's buying it, right? So it almost is free advertising to almost pull a Concord. Like pull a Concord to get everybody talking about your game, whether they love or hate it. But then at the core of it, you do still have to have a good game that everyone wants to play, but you can still have the controversy of like, well, should Assassin's Creed have a black samurai? You got people, talking about that. You got people that are racist saying like, I don't think it should have a black samurai. And then you have people that are not racist that are saying the same thing. Well, I think it would have been better to have an Asian samurai. And then, you have people on the other end. They're like, well, actually, I think, Yasuke is an important character in Japanese culture, and I'm glad that they're bringing him to light, So you have all these different perspectives, and it's almost good to have that level of controversy. And we're going to get into how Grand Theft Auto handles DEI, because we did get into it a little last night, but I would argue that GTA, especially with Carl Johnson, think about it. With Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, they had a African-American main character, and I would arguably say that most of the cast was African-American, right? So if there was a time for them to make sure that they were getting this right, as, predominantly, most of the people at Rockstar, especially at that time, most of them were probably white. So you have a bunch of white people developing a game about African-American gangsters in the 90s, right? I would say a large portion of their studio is or was white, right? And of course the people at the top, the Housers, are obviously white people, right? So these are people that are writing a story and crafting this world, and they have to get it right? Because they can be satirical about the culture and about the people, but they also have to be a certain level of authentic and respectful, right? Because people are going to call it out if they don't get it right, if they don't get the culture right. You know, they nailed Big Smoke, right? They nailed all the various characters throughout the game. Even Officer Tenpenny, right? The corrupt, police officer, voiced by Samuel Jackson, right? So, with games like that, and even Assassin's Creed 2, where you have Roger Craig Smith, a white dude, who is voicing Ezio Auditore da Firenze, you do have to have some sort of like vocal coaching and like some sort of consulting and training to make sure that like you're interpreting Italian culture in a respectful and authentic historical context, and you're not doing it like Mario Brothers, where it's like it's satirical, it might be slightly offensive, and it's just thinking that all Italians have mustaches and say "Mamma Mia" and they're all plumbers, right? So there is some level of DEI consulting that takes place and how it is done right, okay? So we can take Assassin's Creed as an example, even though they take history and they bend it a little bit to make it entertaining and science fiction and make it interesting, but they do approach it with some sort of respect and historical context, and oftentimes you do have to reach out to consulting firms to make sure that you are doing this in a respectful way. But once again, you're not shooing in Italian culture into a game where it doesn't belong, or you're not, in the case of Grand Theft Auto, they weren't forcing black culture into the game. It was a game that was innately created about African American gangsters in the 90s in Los Angeles. Like, it's very it's very accurate to the time period. It dives into stuff like the LA riots. It gets into a lot of deep topics that take place during the 90s in Los Angeles. So it's something that has to be approached with respect, with sensitivity, but also in the world of GTA, everybody gets made fun of equally, okay? So there's satire of everything. There's the Republican Space Rangers on the TV. They make fun of everyone, whether it's on the radio or the TV or the internet in-game, and yet they can still have characters like Michael and Trevor that are white people, and you can have Franklin, who is an African-American character, and obviously created and developed with respect for the diverse culture that he comes from, right? And it doesn't feel like it's forced. No one complained about Franklin being in the game, other than maybe some racist people. But yeah, the idea, they do that diligence when it comes to research. That's a good point. They do the due diligence, and Rockstar comes out with the games when they're ready. They don't rush anything. They don't ham-fist anything in there. They are very intentional. I mean, even think about GTA 4 and putting in a bunch of Slavic characters. Like, that's very niche that they were able to do that and pull it off with respect, and to also sort of, satirize Eastern European culture, right? Rockstar does their diligence, right? When they're ready. Yeah. And that's why you're not getting a GTA 6 trailer, right? They're not doing another one until it's ready. That's how they release things. They are not pressured by E3. They're not pressured by Summer Games Fest. They are not pressured by the Game Awards. They might very well drop a trailer during any one of those events, but they are not pressured by it. They are the exception that proves the rule in that respect. Okay? 4 is your fave. 4 is really good, dude. I think it has, I really enjoy San Andreas quite a bit, and I think it's one of my favorites. But 4 has like the most down-to-earth game and story. And yeah, it does interpret New York really well. And I think I really appreciate the rags to riches to rags story, because most of the games are just rags to riches. You're a nobody 2-bit gangster that rolls into town, and then you become king of the world. But with Nico Bellic and his brother, it sort of teaches, once again, there's a moral to the story. It teaches about, okay, crime can be an easy life that gets you up to a certain point where you're making a lot of money and you're really successful. But also it opens you up to being backstabbed, assassinated, killed, or going to jail and losing it all, right? Oh yeah, the Ballad of Gay Tony DLC was really good. Even Lost and Damned was really good. But yeah, I think Gay Tony, that DLC actually elevated what was already a great game, took it to another level. And once again, right? We were playing as a character that works for Gay Tony, and was he a forced inclusive character? No. They included him because he was key to the story, and he was a character that Rockstar created, and they created a powerful narrative around that character. So honestly, if we want to talk about DEI, maybe it's a masterclass to look at what Rockstar has done and potentially look at what Assassin's Creed has done in the past. I don't know how well they're doing with the current controversy right now, because they've had to delay the game. They've had to backpedal on some things because they've had some statues depict the half Torii Gate, which is a reference to Hiroshima, and is largely considered like disrespectful in this context, because you would actually have a full Torii Gate if you're going to make a statue based in the feudal Japan time period. You would want to have the full Torii Gate in the background if that's something you're going to reference, right? He was in the base section of the bank heist. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was a key part of the story, and I like how everything fits in with the main story. The DLC isn't just something way off here that's happening. It's actually like, okay, well, there's all these interlacing events happening at the same time. And after, even. All right, let's get back to it. Division is lucrative, though. I mean, that's the side point that got us here, is that it's almost, isn't it almost better to have that type of thing? Because even step outside that to the real world, where more people are engaged in politics than ever because you either love Trump or you hate Trump, right? So you either take a stance on that issue. So it's like Trump is good for news agencies because they can report on him all day, and they can either they can be like Fox News or whatever, and they can talk about how great he is and how much they love him and all his policies. And then other news organizations like CNN or MSNBC or whatever can comment on how much they hate this person and how he's dismantling democracy and all these various things. And so it's almost, controversy is good for business because it gets a lot of eyes on the ad revenue that they're making on these news networks, and it gets more people to subscribe to those news networks and the channels that allow them to be presented. So yeah, it's easy advertising, right? So it almost is, as he's talking about here, it's almost like that controversy does sell.
It looks like Division is a very lucrative industry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, right now,
is it better to make a good Halo game, or is it better to make a Halo game that some people hate and some people love, and that way you get that constant like battle of people making videos saying Halo Infinite's the best Halo in years, and then other people saying, oh my god, it's the worst Halo in years. We'll never have another Halo that's like the original Halos, you know? So, I don't know.
We have a lot of publishers and studios that are making a ton of money, billions of dollars. They're overtaking other industries. That's inviting in a lot of investors, and these companies have to show that they're growing. They got to show that they can make more money in the future. So these companies are triple dipping. They're going in, they're checking boxes for tax advantages. They are bringing in these consultancy agencies to make sure they're above board. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, they're using these oversafe work practices to try to make sure that they can avoid any lawsuits. They're trying to protect their money as much as they can and grow it as much as they can. But at the end of the day, The products that we're receiving are a product of that workplace. Now, this isn't to say that the people that are taking advantages of these programs, specifically like grants and things like that, don't deserve that grant or don't deserve the position that they got as a result of it. I think a lot of people fail to recognize or conveniently forget that you have to have the grades to be able to get through these programs in the first place and to graduate to actually even get the job. And when it comes to actual diversity hiring, I don't think there's probably anybody that's out there that thinks that they were hired or even knows that they were hired because they were there to check a box.
Right.
These are suits. These are CEOs that only care about growing profits and their own personal image. They're looking at this like a two-pronged approach. They're doing it to their games and they're doing it to their workplace. They're hiring in people that don't have the merit, they don't have the skill, but they...
This is getting into a good point here. This is getting into a good point. We are kind of seeing the effects of this happen right now, where you had a lot of people being hired for the sake of diversity, where they were just like, oh yeah, we need to have a program that allows more people to get hired at our studio or what have you. And he's mentioning here that it's not about the talent, right? It becomes about ticking a box, saying that, oh yeah, we hired this type of person, and they may not have the skills or the actual merit to have the job. And that's why we're seeing a lot of like universities and corporations are shutting down some of their DEI and diverse. Yeah, even the government has shut down some of their things in that realm. So
they're looking at...
So yeah, they kind of were at some point hiring people just to make sure that you have a diverse workforce so that you get those tax breaks, right? And now we're starting to realize, like, okay, there are obviously people who are diverse that are skilled. You just weren't hiring them because you were trying to just tick a box. You weren't looking at like, okay, does this person have the skills that we need at our studio? Do they have the right sort of attitude for the atmosphere of our studio? That kind of thing.
At this like a two-pronged approach. They're doing it to their games and they're doing it to their workplace. They're hiring in people that don't have the merit, they don't have the skill, but they don't really care about that because as long as they're there, well, they can get the tax break. They have the numbers that they need to actually have to either show to regulators or to show to their board of directors or whatever it might be. And then at the same time, they're using the same ideology, these same practices that are being taught to them by consultancy agencies in their video games to try to grow their audience beyond what it is. And it's going to impact the quality of your games when you do that for long enough, often enough. And I think one of the reasons why we've seen so much of it recently is because the games that we're getting are coming from that growth initiative. They're coming from the time where the video game industry really boomed. And that's why we're seeing a lot of games that are coming out that just lack quality at the end of the day. I'm not even talking about the ideology or messaging. Yeah. I'm just talking about just the general quality of games that are delivered, how buggy they are, frame rate issues, all kinds of different problems.
All the above.
When you have companies that are this big, that have this big of issues, well, their problems become apparent pretty quick. Thomas Mahler, studio lead behind...
I deal with that at my workplace. They went on a spree of hiring people who are not qualified at all, and it hurt the company bad, so they moved away from it. It happens. And sometimes it's intentional where you're trying to hire, diverse people, or you're trying to make sure that, you have a certain amount of women on staff or something. Because, let's be honest, gaming was a boys' club, especially for, the last... maybe 40 plus years. It's been mostly men. I mean, there have been women in the industry for a long time, but it's been like a minority where they're like 2 to 4% of the industry, where now I wouldn't even say that they're like half. I would say probably less than half of the industry. And it's because some of the work culture is still kind of a frat boy-esque type of culture. And so there is some moves that need to be made to actually make games more diverse and more open to both men and women creating things either together or separately. Like, we even have, all-female led teams, and we even have I forget what the show was called. It was a part of the Women Games Dev show. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, the Women-Led Games Showcase. And we did check out some of the games that were made in that. I think it was Sunnyside was one of the games that was made by an entire women-led studio. So, I mean, there is some room for that. And there is room for, there to be incredibly skilled people and stuff like that. Exactly. It was, yeah. And I'm just talking from the creative side, that it was always a boys' club. But we could even say that even from the consumer side, it was mostly a boys' club as well. But obviously over time, you had more people get into that realm and be welcome in that realm. Okay, so we got about 20 minutes left on this video. So
problems become apparent pretty quick. Thomas Mahler, studio lead behind Ori and the Blind Forest and their upcoming game No Rest for the Wicked, responded to a comment from Elon Musk that simply said, DEI kills art. Mahler wrote, I've never retweeted anything from Elon before because I'm a game designer, but I very much agree with this statement. The problem with DEI isn't in its principle, but it's in the way it's being implemented. Years before DEI became a thing, we had Quentin Tarantino, a white director, make a movie about a badass black dude who buddied up with a white dude.
Django Unchained, okay? If you haven't watched it, that's the movie he's referencing. It's a really good one.
My point being, just let artists be artists and DEI will happen naturally. Ultimately, a good message has to come from the heart and not from indoctrination.
Okay, chat, I'm going to put this out to you guys. How do you feel about this statement? Do you agree with it? Does it upset you? Does it, make you think some way or another? Word, it's all about execution. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, because Quentin Tarantino is free to make movies about whatever the hell he wants to, whether it's Pulp Fiction, whether it's Inglourious Bastards, whether it's Django Unchained, or what have you. Okay, facts. We're getting some agreement, some resonation here. Yeah. So, okay, but here's going to be the tricky part of the question. He has a phrase here where he says, just let artists be artists and DEI will happen naturally. Do you believe that is a true statement? Will DEI happen naturally? Like if you're, for example, like him, Thomas Mahler, he's a white person that creates games. Will he ever be compelled to create a game with diverse characters? Does anyone? I mean, Rockstar got around to it, right? Like, Rockstar had a bunch of Grand Theft Auto games that were mostly about white characters, and then eventually San Andreas came along, right? Or even Tommy Vercetti in Vice City. Technically, he's Italian, but white presenting, I would say. Yes and no. You have games like Final Fantasy, which mostly white characters, but then you start getting African American characters being depicted. Like in Final Fantasy VII, you have Barrett. Even Warhammer 40k, Space Marine 2 has a diverse cast. You have Titus, and you have the Asian character with him, and the African American. Well, I guess he would be. I think he's like British. The voice actor that plays him. He's not really. Yeah, it's kind of weird when we're using the term African American with, something that doesn't really fit in there. Sorry, let me actually look up their names. I always forget their names. Yeah, Leandros. Okay, here we go. Yeah, Gadriel is the sort of Asian-looking character, and why is it not showing the other guy? I don't know why it didn't show up in. Yeah, Gadriel is one. Chiron's the other one. Yep. So Chiron would be the black character. Yeah, because I mean, I agree with his statement, but I do think it is a little interesting where it does happen naturally, but sometimes it doesn't, and maybe that's okay because some art, some art is a product of the artist and of their life, right? If you're writing a song, you want to write it about whatever has impacted you in your life and how you feel. You don't want to be told by someone else, this is how you should write the song, and if you don't include this in your song, then you're a racist or a bigot. Like, that doesn't seem right, right? Like, you don't want that type of meddling if you're writing a book or doing a song or whatever creative outlet it is. If you're painting a picture and someone's looking over your shoulder and saying, like, well, why is there no Asian characters in this picture? And it's like, dude, I'm painting a scene of the Bronx, like in New York. Like, come on, man. They got it all in Warhammer. Exactly. They found the feature where you change the voices to different languages. German hits different. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's good to have localization for all various cultures and stuff. But yeah, just speaking about like the accents, he's kind of a British African. British African? How do they say that over there? I don't know if they do. We have the same problem in anime right now. You see this effect in all media. Yeah. Yeah, so I think Mahler has a good point here, and I kind of hate to agree with Elon, but he's kind of right. But I think Mahler really gets to the core of the issue more. I don't think it's necessarily all DEI is bad, and I think that's why we're having this conversation. There's a little more nuance to this issue, and obviously the title of the video is talking about the real impact of DEI in gaming and having that difficult conversation, because how do we get change to result? We have to have these complicated conversations, whether it's in politics or what have you. We have to sit down and hash out these issues, right? So whether it's, immigrants coming into the country or whatever, we have to have these difficult conversations that's like, okay, well, America is a country of immigrants, so we have to acknowledge that. Immigration is good to America, okay? So then we have to talk about the other side. Okay, there's illegal immigration and there's legal immigration. Okay, so we want everyone to come in the right way, right? We don't want illegal immigrants to come in. Okay, great. So how do we best do that? Do we manage it by building a giant wall, or do we manage it through some sort of government intervention where we have people at the border checking people in and making sure that we're, letting the right ones in or what have you? Do we have a process where they can become citizens and stuff like that, and become tax-paying citizens perhaps, things like that, where they become an important and productive part of society? We have to have these difficult conversations, right? So we have to come together and we have to hash it out and we have to voice our disagreements and we have to, come to some sort of compromise in order for things to get done. So we do have to have these difficult conversations about DEI, and we do have to acknowledge that some of it, especially when we're looking at like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, or we're looking at the Assassin's Creed games and their respect to culture and history, it's important that you get things right. So Elon Musk is not entirely correct when he says that DEI kills art. I think it can kill art in some respects, and we've seen it corrupt really good art, right? Anyway, keep it moving. We got 18 minutes
And
to
I think this is the heart of the issue, indoctrination, because that's what it feels like. Many people have grown up, like myself, being taught that everyone is human, identities are a feature, character is the person. But over the last few years, it feels like people want to rewrite that, making someone's outward appearance and their lineage the only thing that matters. And if you question it from the perspective of equality, you're chastised by developers, the media, and those who don't care for nuance.
Okay. So he brings up an important point here, is that rather than creating someone with character values that you find relatable or interesting, they are creating the visual aspects of the character first. And they're trying to push an agenda that way. Let's hear it again.
Of equality, you're chastised.
Sorry. Oh. Well, I just freaking closed all the... I really hate that there's like a button here that just closes every tab. Hang on. Boy, we really did just lose the whole video. See if we don't.
This. I've tried to do my best.
Oh man, we lost our part.
Whereas general quality of games that are delivered, how buggy they are, frame rate issues, all kinds of different problems.
All right, let me
when
find
you have
where
companies
we
that
were.
are this big, that have this big of issues, well, the problem with DEI, media, and those are the heart of the issue, indoctrination, because that's what it feels like. Many people have grown up, like myself, being taught that everyone is human, identities are a feature, character is the person. But over the last few years, it feels like people want to rewrite that, making someone's outward appearance and their lineage the only thing that matters. And
so we talked about this last night as part of the stream, and we kind of got to the issue that let me ask the question. Can you only relate to a character if they look exactly like you? If they have a mustache, if they have long hair, if they are the race you are or the orientation that you are, is that the only way that you can relate to a character? Or can you have a character? Can you have a character that looks completely different than you, right? Can you have someone that doesn't look like you be relatable, right? Does every video game, does every movie need to be exactly like you in order for you to empathize or to enjoy it as a product of media? Because that's what the root of this discussion is at right here. The outward appearance and the lineage of the character being the only thing that matters, when actually it's what's in here and in here that matters, right? It's who you are, it's the character, it's the fact that Jon Stewart here is a hero and he's relatable. He's a veteran, he's he's someone that learns to stand up against fear. And yeah, I mean, obviously we played games like Tomb Raider where, we've played as, strong, heroic, beautiful female characters. I've played games like Grand Theft Auto where I play as characters that are, like Carl Johnson. They're completely different to me, that I have no idea of what that culture or what that experience is like for someone. So yeah, you can still have fun, but there is a certain part of this DEI consulting and culture that thinks that is the only way. That if the character isn't my exact orientation, then I can't enjoy it. And that's crazy. Because literally all media ever, you can read Lord of the Rings and find characters that you empathize with despite them not being like you or looking like you.
And if you question it from the perspective of equality, you're chastised by developers, the media, and those who don't care for nuance. I've said it before, I'll say it again.
And we did have this with Star Wars The Acolyte, where I believe the creators and, yeah, I guess we would just say the creators, came out attacking anyone that criticized the show, because there is no room for nuance. It's immediately, they would immediately brand people that disagreed with either the story or the character choices or the actresses or actors that were in the show. They would immediately brand them as racists or bigots, despite them just saying, hey, it's not a good story. It's bad writing. It breaks the lore of the Star Wars universe. So yeah, I think this statement here really hits at the core of an issue.
And if you question it from the perspective of equality, you're chastised by developers, the media, and those who don't care for nuance. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is being pushed by people that lack the care, talent, class, and most importantly, the character to be able to tell diverse stories or represent a variety of people.
he's saying that these people don't have the skills to tell a good story about diversity. And I do see that. Whether it's in Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, Concord, even Star Wars, right? Like, they were just shilling in characters of especially in the Acolyte, I would say. I think Star Wars has done a good job overall with diversity, because we've had characters like Lando, we've had characters like Samuel L. Jackson's character. We've had, obviously diverse alien type characters that are all sorts of very different characters, and they've done a good job telling those stories, because they're not focused on like what the character looks like. They're focused on like, how does this person exist in this universe? What do they do? What do they think? What do they believe? What actions do they take? What sort of core values do they have? Mace Windu is not just pushed in as a token black character. He literally has like character development and value in the universe. Whereas I could argue like some of the characters that are in the Acolyte don't have that. They are just like, hey, look at us. We added a non-binary character to the show. Like, aren't we great? Like, no, it's, you have to give them a reason for being in the world and for existing, and you have to give them meaningful backstory and character development. So when I play Mouse, I should bash it because I don't agree with the animal violence. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it's the same situation like with Sigourney Weaver in the Aliens movie. She didn't want to be in that movie because they were going to have guns, and James Cameron had to sit her down and say, look, I get you have this liberal, anti-gun stance, but these weapons are core to the story of the Aliens universe, and if we're going to have the colonial Marines in here, blasting aliens and stuff, and you being the badass, female lead here that's going to pick up one of those guns and start blasting aliens, we have to make sure that we do this correctly and respectfully. We have to make sure that we, it's not glorifying gun violence. It's a key part of the story, right? Yeah, you can I can identify with Cuphead because I can't sip from them. Yeah.
If employees are demanded to make characters, stories, and games that appeal to specific identities alone, games aren't being made organically. They're coming off a factory press, molded to suit whatever a marketing department's...
This game, by the way, which only has a player count of like 2?
Idea of diversity is
Dustborn?
Gay characters with half-shaved and colored hair, the token black character with the same haircut from...
The Killmonger cut, by the way, which... what is it? The guy from Valorant has it. The latest, the Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown has a Killmonger cut.
An urban upbringing backed by a hip-hop soundtrack, and the evil white, the
dude.
same haircut from an urban upbringing backed by a hip-hop soundtrack.
Why do they do this in like every game trailer nowadays? They do the hip-hop soundtrack to try to make it seem like hip and young and like in the culture, but it comes across as like Steve Buscemi's, hello fellow kids, like it doesn't really, it's obviously, you're trying to project to that market and you're not doing a good job of actually doing it, right? It's like when grown-up white people try to rap, but they're like 40 years old,
Soundtrack and the evil white villain. We see it across all forms of media.
Yeah.
It's unoriginal, it's tacky, it's offensive, and it's done for all the wrong reasons.
Yep.
Sweet Baby Incorporated, a narrative consulting company that has become infamous for pushing some of the most extreme and heavy-handed DEI initiatives in gaming. The company...
Yeah, I think them having the burning the games industry to the ground, even if that's like a tongue-in-cheek reference, that should not be in a major presentation to the industry. And by the way, what cooler stories have they made? Because you're a consulting firm. You're not in charge of actually writing the story, right? Alan Wake 2, God of War, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. Most of these games, these stories are already done before the consulting firm comes in. and they don't actually get to change anything narratively. They get to come in and say, okay, well, this line here might be disrespectful to African American culture. Let's see if we can make that, more accurate and more sensitive, right? Yeah, and the Killmonger cut is the only hairstyle we see. And why is that? Well, half of it is the fact that a lot of these games were being developed when Black Panther was coming out in theaters. A lot of the games we're seeing now were developed 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago even. And what movie was in theaters? Black Panther. And what was the haircut that took, the entire culture by storm? It was the Killmonger cut. Everyone was sporting it, and so everyone realized, like, okay, let's start putting it in the games, I don't know anything about them, and I already don't like them. Yeah, I guess prepare to dive in.
But he has made headlines not for their approach to storytelling, but for the lack in quality of games that they've consulted on and the controversial statements from its leaders that show just how little integrity this company has. A figure from Sweet Baby Incorporated went as far to say that marketing teams need to be terrified of the consequences if they don't make their games culturally sensitive, implying that fear and coercion should drive creative decisions rather than genuine artistic expression. Fear and coercion.
Let's play it back. Let's play it back. Listen to that one more time.
Baby Incorporated went as far to say that marketing teams need to be terrified of the consequences if they don't make their games culturally sensitive, implying that fear and coercion should drive creative decisions rather than genuine artistic expression. Perhaps one of the more revealing statements came from one of their leaders giving a presentation saying their ultimate goal was to burn the industry to the ground. These extreme views highlight just how far removed this company is from the art and value that developers bring. Instead of enhancing the creative process or developing authentic, meaningful stories,
I don't really understand what that. Yeah, I don't really know what that's
stories,
about.
Their approach is rooted in pushing divisive ideologies and using scare tactics to remain relevant as the consulting industry makes billions of dollars a year. Just look at the way that people are represented in these games and what games they're doing it in, and tell me why people shouldn't get upset.
Ugly character design that no one wants to play as, but also let's let him talk.
Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, a game aimed at DC comic fans and young men, making journal entries about Wonder Woman and oppressive toxic masculinity, retconning Mr. Freeze into Miss Freeze, creating an abomination in character design.
Okay. They're not retconning Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze has already had his story throughout Arkham Knight. They gave him the perfect swan song. He's done in this Arkham universe. What this is Mrs. Freeze is actually a character that is from a parallel universe, but it is lazy writing. It's literally just wanting to have a female lesbian, butch, kind of ugly looking character in your game because that's what you want to push. That's your agenda that you want to push and represent. We can't have a good looking Mrs. Freeze. And of course, because of forced diversity, which I would argue that this is, she's with Nora Freeze. Nora Freeze is still, stuck frozen, has her disease or what have you. And obviously this version, which is, I think her name is Victoria Frias, which, I mean, even the naming, it's just it's a lazy gender swap. When you could have chosen Killer Frost or Captain Cold, actual members of the Suicide Squad in the comics, if you are making a game for comic book fans, you should be referencing the comic books and you should be pulling characters from the comics, not creating new characters that are lazy gender and orientation swaps? Is that a thing? Like a sexual orientation swap? Because normally Mr. Freeze and Nora is kind of a heterosexual couple. And I also think none of that should matter, right? Like, there is no, in reality, there is no, like, sex in Star Wars or DC or Marvel. Like, these are properties that are aimed at children, teenagers, with obviously adults that enjoy this content, but it's not meant to be like Game of Thrones, where it's like it's very adult content, it's very mature themes, it's rated R, it's got nasty things in it, right? Whether it's violence or whether it's sexual violence or what have you, right? Like, these properties are sort of pure of that. Doesn't mean that they can't tell important and deep and adult stories, but they keep it clean for the most part, right? If that makes sense. So, let's go from there.
And get upset. Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, a game aimed at DC comic fans and young men, making journal entries about Wonder Woman and oppressive toxic masculinity, retconning Mr. Freeze into Miss Freeze, creating an abomination in character design.
It is an abomination in character design, I will say that.
All the while delivering horrible gameplay in an uninspired shooter. These are things that customers didn't knowingly sign up for when they purchased the game.
That's true. We didn't knowingly sign up for this. We assumed that, based on the Suicide Squad being these 4 characters, that we might get access to future characters down the line, like Rick Flag or Peacemaker or Killer Frost or Captain Cold, or that they would even pull in, like, popular DC villains. So it makes sense that they did include the Joker as a playable character, because he is a common DC villain, and while he is not necessarily a member of the Suicide Squad, he does show up in Suicide Squad comics, movies, TV shows, what have you, in the past. So it's not unusual that they did that. But the fact that they sort of forced in the little detail that this iteration of the Joker, which is not the Joker of the Arkhamverse, once again, he's from a parallel universe, but that this version of the Joker is gay. Like, why did that need to be in there? It's not key to the story. It's not part of the narrative at all. It's forced, right? So we're finally getting into that term that we talked about earlier in the video. We said forced diversity. Keep that in mind. What's an example of that? Okay, here we are. Now, I will argue that the Joker having a prosthetic leg, I don't really have a problem with it. That could also be seen as some sort of forced diversity, but honestly, it doesn't change the character. It's just part of who he is. It's like, this Joker clearly doesn't have a leg for some reason or another. And so he has a prosthetic leg, and it kind of ends up being kind of a little funky aspect of his character and traversal. I don't know. And then also when we dive into the character of Lawless, once again, Lawless sorry, I can't type. So Lawless is a white male character that served in the Suicide Squad during World War II. He's white, okay? So what did they do in the new Suicide Squad game? Right? We have Lawless here. They did not only a gender swap, but a race swap of the character, right? So this is another aspect where we see what is called, quote-unquote, forced diversity, right? And so what did they do here? Why did the character need to be changed this way? Okay, well, she's Zoe Lawton, so she's Floyd Lawton's daughter. So she is the daughter of Deadshot. Okay. But why is she named Lawless if it's not a reference to the original Lawless character from DC lore, who is oddly like a very niche character to choose if you were going to add characters from the Suicide Squad? You would obviously probably want to go with like Captain Cold or Killer Frost or literally like even just pull up a list of Suicide Squad members, right? Right? Okay, here's some members that are not in the game. Bane, El Diablo. Rick Flag is in the game, but he's not playable. Black Manta, Captain Cold. Katana, Killer Croc, Bronze Tiger, sorry. Cameron Chase, Clock King, Deathstroke, which Deathstroke is allegedly coming in Season 4, Atom Smasher, Black Adam Cheetah, Copperhead, Count Vertigo, Electrocutioner, Enchantress, Killer Frost, King Shark, right? King Shark's in the game. But yeah, there's obviously, like, we could obviously go in here and keep, yeah, I mean, Bloodsport. Look, there's so many more here. Yeah, Captain Boomerang's in the game, like Javelin. Reverse Flash has been the Suicide Squad. How crazy would that be? Mongol. Peacemaker would have been cool. Polka Dot Man could have been wild. Ratcatcher. Joker has been Suicide Squad adjacent. I wouldn't say that he's usually a key member. Thinker, TDK, Starro, Savant. Yeah, Rick Flag once again, Weasel. Right? They could have gone. Yeah, Brown Tiger. Yeah, put Brown Tiger in the Suicide Squad. No, I meant Bronze Tiger. My bad. Yeah, we don't need to know who Joker sleeps with. Yeah, it's not key to the character or the lore or anything like that. So yeah, when it comes to this, why did they name her Lawless? Let me get to what I think it is, and let's see if we all have a collective laugh here. So her name is Zoe Lawton. She's a criminal. Her father is a criminal. Lawton? Lawless? So to be lawless would be without law, right? Less of law. Criminal. Lawless. Lawton. Get it? Lawton. Law. Lawless. Yeah. Someone tried to make a real cringe funny because they're not trying to reference the original Lawless of DC Comics lore. They're trying to do something else entirely. Did we lose the video again? Okay, no we didn't. All right. Sorry, let me close this tab. But yeah, I would argue that is a race swap and a gender swap, which once again, it's lazy. You have the whole DC universe to pull from, and you literally chose to create something out of thin air and make it lazy and terrible. And she's also, this makes it even more cringe, she's also a live streamer. Okay, so she's like live streaming and she's like, don't forget to like and subscribe. And just like Screwball in Spider-Man 2018 by Insomniac Games, Screwball was the cringe villain that was live streaming, kidnapping people and strapping bongs to them, and Spider-Man had to, be on the live stream and try to rescue the hostages and stuff. I don't know if we can call her Robin Hood adjacent. That's more, that would require actual character development. But yeah, she does kind of try to be like a noble villain or what have you, who engages in crime for the right reasons, but it just comes across as so copy pasta and lazy and cringe and just being a swap of the character. Anyway,
many believe that they were customers.
But yeah, the idea here that he's getting at is that we as customers didn't know that the game was going to evolve into this way where it has characters that are not part of the DC universe and they're just a bunch of gender and race swaps and lazy storytelling that are meant to push an agenda of forced diversity.
Didn't knowingly sign up for when they purchased the game. Many believe that they were buying a game from a beloved studio who developed award-winning titles. That's not what they got. Take Concord, a game that was criticized well before its release for its awkward attempt at forced diversity. The marketing felt contrived, a Marvel knockoff, highlighting character designs that seemed to tick boxes rather than focusing on the game's actual content, which shone through because once the game was released, it was a game that was too busy trying to be safe that it appealed to nobody. A game that came from PlayStation, where players are invested in their platform and have high expectations for high-quality games, only to find out that this is what PlayStation's leadership thinks of their fans and what their investment is worthy of.
They'll buy anything.
A lot of people have dunked on Dustborn, a game that felt more like a caricature of diversity rather than a game aimed at a genuine audience. One that was heavily criticized for how poor of a job it pretended to do representing the people that it was apparently made for. social criticisms aside, its developer actually admitted in a recent interview that they knew that people don't like their games and they knew that people wouldn't like this game. Yet somehow they're astonished by the backlash for how ridiculous the game was. My biggest criticism here is the fact that this developer, the studio lead, knew that this game wasn't going to make any money. They knew that it was a game that nobody wanted.
Why
and they
make
took
it?
Millions of dollars in government assistance to make.
They took 14 million from the Norwegian Film Institute for the development of the game and received around 150,000 euros in EU grants to make a game that literally has like a player base of like 2 people on Steam. Money laundering. Yikes. This is wild because this is supposed to be Arkham vs. Rocksteady. Who got to them? Well, they hired a bunch of arguably DEI hires. So they hired people that were diverse, but they didn't hire people that had the merit and the skills that fit the studio of the studio that made the beloved Arkham games, right? And obviously the two creative leads from Rocksteady left just before the project launched, which they knew it was probably going to be some sort of a failure, and now they have created their own studio called 100 Star Games, I believe. Which I believe they're working on like a big single player thing. Yeah, 100 people, AAA games, London studio. Yeah, Sefton Hill and Jamie Walker, the founders of Rocksteady Studios. So they obviously saw the writing on the wall that, you know, Rocksteady was not the beloved studio or the same studio that made the great games that we've lauded over time. They're just, you know, so many people have come and gone through that studio that it's just not the same. So you're probably never going to get anything reminiscent of the original Arkhamverse. What have you?
Make it. Taxpayer dollars that could have gone to a different Norwegian studio to make a game that people actually wanted. We're now seeing developers shoehorn ideologies and diversity into their video games without any regard for content.
That is legitimately money laundering, I think. I think you might legitimately have a case against these developers for money laundering. If they knew it was going to fail, and they took all this money to create something just so that they could get that money and pay themselves. That's literally, yeah. So the question is, if you've seen this fail time and time again, and you're only pandering to the 1%, why keep doing this? Yeah, it's a very loud minority that wants these type of games like Dustborn, Concord, or even the corrupted version of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. You're trying to pander to this new audience so that you can expand your ever-growing audience. Like, it's not enough to have DC Comics fans. You need to expand and make sure that you have even more fans, right? So the constant expansion of the gaming industry, which he kind of talks about at the beginning of the video, is that the developers need and the corporations need to constantly be making more and more money year after year, means that you have to expand. You have to appeal to more wider player bases. You have to make games that are more mainstream. That's why we don't get niche titles like stealth games anymore, because Ubisoft can't market to Splinter Cell gamers because it's a small minority. They have to say, oh, well, Assassin's Creed isn't a stealth game anymore. It's actually a Greek warrior or Viking warrior simulator, right? The reason these games changed was to appeal to a wider audience. Now, what have they done? They've corrupted their original values. They've told less compelling stories, and they have arguably probably worse gameplay than what they used to have. So by changing all these things, they've in some essence you're selling games to nobody, because nobody wants this, right? Nobody bought Concord, nobody bought Dustborn.
To make a game that people actually wanted. We're now seeing developers shoehorn ideologies and diversity into their video games without any regard for context, narrative integrity, or the desires of their audience.
So see, that's the important part that we're addressing today. It's not diversity bad. It's that there needs to be context. There needs to be, as he said, narrative integrity. And you also have to take into account the desires of your audience. Does the audience want to play as a fat, ugly, non-binary character? Or do they want to play as a strong, muscly black male? Like, yeah, absolutely. Maybe. That's up to them. Yeah.
Completely ignoring those
decide.
things. Take infamous examples like characters being redesigned or elements being removed from remasters or remakes.
This is another one. Elements being removed from remasters and remakes, right? So didn't we see changes in remasters and remakes? There have been a few that we've seen. I know a lot of it is probably people being upset that characters, because a lot of the games that are being remastered right now are games from the early 2000s when gaming was a little more risque, a little more, I guess the term would be like, yeah, like a little more risque and a little more adult themed in some ways. Like a lot of those early 2000s games were kind of, I think the best example, let me see, Lollipop Chainsaw, where they literally like toned down some of the lewd visuals, I guess. I don't know if there's like... Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's like a real... Yeah, there's just... You kind of see what type of game it is, and a lot of people have claimed that they've sort of gone through the game and tried to like purify it, maybe to try to make it less promiscuous, and we are sort of seeing this sort of censorship when a lot of games are being remade. I think even if we look at, I don't know if they have a comparison here. Yeah, I mean, there's the comparison with Maria not really having her traditional, like, Christina Aguilera, more promiscuous leopard print outfit. It doesn't really bug me, but, it was a change. It was a change that was intentional. Yeah, and I mean, obviously people are going to mod things in, that, whether that's good or bad. There's maybe some things that you probably shouldn't change. There's some stuff that is innately part of the source material, that it is important to the preservation of the game and the story and what have you.
Really to fit modern DEI standards. Lara Croft, Silent Hill 2, whether it's changing character models, gender, or backstory, not to serve the plot, but for a specific agenda. It all results in tokenism, where characters become caricatures of the very identities they're supposed to represent. Instead of nuanced, well-rounded individuals, we get stereotypes, over-the-top, one-dimensional characters that feel more like corporate creations than artistic expressions. It's no wonder that players are frustrated. When we're buying a game, we are entering into an exchange where we are giving our money and expecting a product that was crafted with care, creativity, and respect for the audience. But that respect isn't there anymore. Instead, what we are seeing more and more is the injection of forced messaging, hamstringing the creative process. Games that are starting to feel more like manufactured products made to meet quotas and marketing objectives rather than passion projects that are inviting gamers, inviting players into engaging and meaningful worlds.
Okay, so he is getting to something that's really interesting where gaming has become sort of a corporate manufactured product rather than a creation of artistic expression meant to be just fun, right? And entertaining. That's what
more
gaming
like manufactured
used to be.
products made to
And
meet quotas and
sometimes
marketing
is.
objectives rather than passion projects that are inviting gamers, inviting players into engaging and meaningful worlds. The issue with DEI isn't about the principles themselves, it's about how it's being implemented. Like Thomas Mahler said, DEI will happen naturally if artists are allowed to be artists.
Right.
The problem arises when corporate interests take over and diversity becomes a commodity to sell rather than a genuine attempt to reflect on the world that we live in. It leads to a disconnect between players and the game.
And that's the thing. I think we've got into this sometimes. Yeah, I appreciate you, Jay. Have a good one. Yeah, feel free to check back in if you want to see like how the discussion plays out later. You can always chime in the comments, or we can talk later. But yeah, he's getting into something here where
An attempt to reflect on the world that we live in.
Is that we talked about this a little bit last night, how there's sort of always a moral to the story and how you can reference the world we live in through allegory, right? Like Star Wars does this. Obviously, the Empire is a reflection of sort of the Nazi party. You know, they're all dressed in white and black armor. You know, Darth Vader's in black. It's referencing like the SS troopers of the Nazi party, and it was obviously a reference to World War II and the imperial control of the Third Reich. But at the same time, in films like Return of the Jedi, the Ewoks and the Rebellion was meant to sort of represent the Viet Cong and George Lucas's distaste for the Vietnam War, which a lot of people were largely against during that time period. And America was sort of visualized in that movie as the evil imperial force, right? And it was the rebellion that was using guerrilla war tactics that the Viet Cong would use. So it was sort of a light projection of allegory of what's happening in our society, but portrayed through a fictional science fiction lens. So he was able to sort of voice his political thoughts and opinions, but he did it through allegory. He created a beautiful universe and a beautiful world with that stuff just added in there. The intention behind creating Star Wars was not to push political propaganda or agendas. It was to create this world that was entertaining for kids and adults, right? And that's why we have so many great Star Wars projects that are beloved over the years. And it's the same thing with video games and the same thing with movies and TV shows. If you create a TV show with the idea of not reflecting the world that we live in, but actually trying to offend people directly, like with She-Hulk, they were like, oh, we're going to create a strong female who can buck the haters, you know? And we're making a show that is strictly made to make men uncomfortable. You end up with a failure of a show because, once again, She-Hulk, she's already a strong, independent female character. It's a good thing. She breaks the fourth wall. There's all sorts of great humor. She's a character that men and women can get behind. But when you have bad writing that is made to push an agenda rather than to tell a good story with the character and the world involved, that's a good thing. I can't do a review of Black Ops 6 here. That's for another video. I'm sorry. We're talking about DEI and its impact on gaming here, so we do have to stay on topic. But yeah, we are talking about this, and so in instances like that, it's like, why did She-Hulk fail? And Deadpool did largely the same thing. It's satirical. It makes fun of everyone. He has fourth wall breaking humor. It's because Ryan Reynolds and the writers focused on writing a character that was loyal to the source material, and they told a good story, and they weren't trying to push any sort of agenda. There you go.
It leads to a
So let's go back.
rather than a is when corporate interests take over and diversity becomes a commodity to sell rather than a genuine attempt to reflect on the world that we live in. It leads to a disconnect between players and the games, and ultimately between the creators and their audience. And I think that's a fair and valid criticism to make because it's something observable. We can see it happening in the industry today. And while we've had a lot of games that have come out, absolutely incredible games, at the same time, the reason why players are so upset, the reason why this is such a popular talking point is because it's happening within the foundation of the industry. It's happening to the companies that are the very pillars that elevated the industry. The companies that made the games that made us gamers.
It's Ubisoft. It's happening to all the studios, right? It's Ubisoft, it's Rocksteady. We've seen these studios change over time, and they've become a shadow of what they used to be. Ubisoft used to be my favorite studio, right? They used to make all the Tom Clancy games. They made all the Prince of Persia games, and now they're kind of a shadow of what they are here. They're arguably just making various agenda-based games, and they're making games that really are for nobody, and they don't have the quality that these games used, or that these, they don't have the quality that their games used to have. When people said this, you're called toxic. I recently completed Stellar Blade. Most of the cast is female. Yeah. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think Stellar Blade is an example of people rebutting the DEI stuff, or at least the bad version of DEI, where it is corporate corruption and it is forced inclusivity and stuff like that. You get a game like Stellar Blade or Space Marine or Black Myth Wukong, where it's like, hey, we're not trying to push an agenda. We're just going to make a good game. And yeah, our game might have really good looking characters or, really engaging gameplay. Not a problem.
It's Activision, EA, Blizzard,
Activision,
Xbox, PlayStation, the list goes on. We get why they're doing it. It's all for money. But the funny thing is that they're losing a lot of it doing what they've been doing.
Yep.
And it's got me thinking.
That's the question.
I've noticed over the last couple of years, some of these breakout successes that we've seen have reached incredible heights that I don't think that they would have reached if it wasn't for the fact that the industry is in the state that it's in. They created this situation. They swung the pendulum in one direction, and now it's stuck. And because of that,
I think Stellar Blade and Wukong are equally great. I think Wukong is better because it does have a little more engaging gameplay, and it has some lore that is really incredible that goes along with it. I think the Chinese mythology really elevates it, but I also like the beautiful science fiction world that Stellar Blade has created. I'm actually interested in exploring it further, so I really enjoy both games. I don't know why it's not a big hit. I think possibly Wukong resonated more with critics, whereas Stellar Blade, the critics were biased, and they were like, oh, it's just pretty big butt girl, in a video game. So I think the critics were aggressively biased, because what do the critics want to push? They want to push the DEI shovelware. They don't want to push something that is anti-DEI, which is, just beautiful characters, with giant technological swords and guns and stuff in a futuristic setting, right? There's nothing wrong with beautiful girls. I agree. But some critics and people that are pushing this DEI shovelware think that that's a bad thing, and that games need to be like Concord and Dustborn, and they need to have ugly characters that no one wants to see or play as.
Their competition is getting richer by the day. They're getting more fans, they're getting more support, and it's going to make it even more difficult for some of these companies to be able to back out of the position that they're in. Baldur's Gate 3, Black Myth Wukong, Stellar Blade, Space Marine 2, Helldivers 2, Pal World. There's a huge list of games that we've seen come out over the last couple of years that have been absolute bangers, and there's an ocean of difference with the quality and feel of those games and some of these patronizing attempts at guilting us out of our money. Even more so, games that are putting themselves in a position that we feel guilty for trying to voice our criticisms on. And they really like that last part.
Yeah.
us not wanting to voice our criticisms. Characters, identities, DEI, none of these things were dominant talking points in the gaming industry before because, to be quite frank, nobody cared or noticed. Games were seen as a universal medium where anyone could find something to enjoy. In the past, developers didn't feel the need to loudly proclaim that their game was diverse. It was just a natural part of the storytelling. Characters were designed to fit the narrative or the gameplay, not to check boxes for...
Characters designed to fit the narrative and the gameplay. They weren't. No one was virtue signaling when Grand Theft Auto San Andreas came out. Rockstar wasn't like, look at us, we're the first game in the world to have a black protagonist. No, they didn't do any of that shit. They were just like, this is the narrative we want to tell. This is the gameplay we want to have. It's going to be about, wearing your gang colors and earning respect. And, generating that through your actions, through the clothing you choose to wear. Make sure that you're wearing the Grove Street colors and that your respect level is high and that your fashion is in good sense so that you attract the women in the game. There you go.
Representation.
DEI does not... The things you're referencing there with Batman and even Peter Parker, Peter being sidelined is not true. It's a game with two protagonists. So they get equal share. Peter and Miles get equal share. But obviously they are trying to push forward Miles as the new protagonist moving forward. But that is these consulting firms that do this, DEI consulting firms, they are not in charge of the story. They don't change the story. The story's already written by the time they get to look at the script. They are just making sure that it's culturally sensitive. That's the role. Now, we can argue that some of these consulting firms like Sweet Baby are doing this wrong or improperly or with malice in mind, right? But they're not writing that Batman dies. That's part of the story Rocksteady wanted to tell, okay? That's separate. Sweet Baby has no power over the narrative. That's why Alan Wake 2 is just the way it is. All Sweet Baby did was consult on the African-American female character to make sure that she was respectful and culturally sensitive to the African-American experience, to make sure that they weren't being offensive, right? It would be hard to tell a story about a white guy in a black gang in the 90s in California. Yeah, it just wouldn't fit. It wouldn't fit. That's very true. But I think they designed that game with that intention. I think they thought about it very deeply, and that's why they chose Carl Johnson. So let's go back a little bit.
They proclaimed that their game was diverse. It was just a natural part of the storytelling. Characters were designed to fit the narrative or the gameplay, not to check boxes for representation. This allowed games back then to thrive creatively with
some of those
unique and
games
varied experiences
did
that
a really
applied
good job
or
with
appealed to
diversity.
different
Mass
audiences.
Effect.
And I think that's the most important part. Not every game was made for everyone, but there was always something to find for everyone. Players simply just connected with characters, or they ignored the ones that they didn't relate to, and the focus always remained on the game's quality rather than the demographic that they were trying to reach. It's only in recent years that character identities have been pushed to the forefront, making DEI feel constant, this forced presence in every conversation, often distracting from the core of what games are supposed to be, engaging, fun, and worth our money.
See, every game has now become a culture war and a push for forced diversity. We've always had diversity in games, and it will continue whether you like it or not. There will be diversity in games, and it will be a good thing, right? You'll have Rise of the Ronin, where it's, Japanese characters in feudal Japan. You will have, characters in Assassin's Creed that will be Japanese characters, regardless of whether you like Yasuke or not. He's, obviously a Japanese African character. He's a blend of both cultures. He's an African man who immerses himself in Japanese culture. It's going to happen whether you like it or not, and it's always been here. But it's never been the reason for making a game, right?
Now, identity is the only thing people talk about. Now, this may come as a surprise to a lot of people, but genuine racism, bigotry, and hate actually exist. There are studios and developers today that are under a constant barrage of hate from fans and people that will never even play their games. Just recently, I watched a panel that was criticizing comments that were made by the studio head of Tales of Kanzera Zhao. The studio ended up announcing their hiatus due to the game's poor performance.
Surgent, layoffs. Yeah, and this is Abubakar Salim's studio, who he was the sheriff of Egypt in Assassin's Creed Origins. Bayek of Siwa. Yeah. And this is the game that he developed with this studio, and it's meant to delve into African culture, and it's meant to be about the death of his father and how he deals with that grief. This game is meant. So I actually really do want to play this game, but apparently this game is one of those games where people feel like Sweet Baby Inc. has meddled in this game so much that it has caused it to be like a weird or a bad game. Yeah, even Assassin's Creed, we've had white characters, we've had Italian characters, we've had Arabs, we've had Chinese, we've had Indian characters, you've had Egyptian characters, you've had African characters, Freedom Cry, the whole spectrum. So if you don't like diversity, Assassin's Creed might not be the series for you. Yeah, Sweet Baby Inc. doesn't create the narrative. I don't know how to state this more clearly to you. They have no control over the narrative. They consult. Do you know what that means? It's like editing. They can look at it and they can suggest things. They can say, okay, you need to be sensitive to this African American female that only speaks through sign language because she's deaf. You need to be sensitive to Miles Morales, who is a black African Puerto Rican character. We need to make sure that his dialogue is respectful and on point and culturally sensitive to the experience. They put those suggestions forward. It is only Insomniac Games and that studio who decides whether those things get implemented at the end of the day. Does that make sense? So, no one is changing the narrative. Consulting is a suggestion. Consulting, right? A consultant is someone who you consult with for their advice. You are not required to take their advice. And when Sweet Baby Inc. gets the script of a game, it's when that script is complete. So they are not changing anything. They are not allowed to change anything. They are only allowed to suggest, right? Yeah, that decision, it's not, yeah, that's not, you're just wrong. I'm sorry. They have no control over whether Peter or Miles is the main character. That is on Insomniac Games. There you go. So we're going to see what happens in Spider-Man 3. But yeah, Green Goblin, I think Peter is going to be on hiatus, but I think he's going to have to come back. I think he thinks he can put away Spider-Man, but I think he's going to realize that the world needs him. And that the world needs Miles. I think Miles will continue to be relevant. And I think they've obviously said that, Spider-Man 2 is sort of a changing of the guard. Yeah, so consulting firms have no power over changing the story. It's just a fact. That's just how the system works. The story for Suicide Squad, Spider-Man 2, Alan Wake 2, the story for all these games was already written by people that are not Sweet Baby Inc. That story does not change regardless of what Sweet Baby Inc. says. All they do is they change little bits of dialogue, little things that people say. And those are suggestions. At the end of the day, it's up to the studio to decide whether those changes pull through.
Game that ultimately failed because of its deep ties to Sweet Baby Incorporated that already generated a lot of distrust, and also it was being praised and promoted by the least trustworthy people in games media. The studio's lead, Abubakar Salim, back in May, spoke in a video about how often he's been told that he hasn't earned his position, how he's faced prejudice and attacks.
That's racism for
it
sure.
It actually felt like a genuine heart-to-heart, only for the video to end with him announcing a promotion for the game and it being heavily discounted, evaporating any goodwill that the video was supposed to represent and ultimately making it feel like a marketing scheme. The panel who chose to criticize Salim, made up of a few well-known figures on Twitter, instead of making thoughtful criticisms, only chose to mention things like Rafiki when making fun of the way that he dressed, or saying that he's never met his father when he mentioned his dad passing away, and that the studio should have been called Spear Chucker Studio. It's
incredibly
disgusting,
racist,
abhorrent, blatant racist behavior that belongs nowhere near and
See,
does
the game
not
doesn't
represent
look bad.
any
it
of
looks
the genuine
cool.
criticisms that we've had for either
I'm
Surgeon
game to play it
Studios,
someday.
Abubakar Salim, or Tales of Kanzera Zhao, or the rest of the industry for that matter. I hate it because we exist in this weird place where, because of social media, the most outrageous opinions catch the most eyes.
That's
where
right.
comments like the
Hate
ones that I
sells.
just mentioned become the blanket scapegoat for genuine criticism. We have journalists and developers that are out there talking about how hateful gamers are. We have articles written about how Helldivers 2 was somehow promoting fascism, even though it was a handful of edgelords in a Discord. We have the senior editor of Kotaku on a public showcase telling people that she wants to fight them physically if they don't like the direction of games today. We have Forbes writing articles about Dragon Age the Veilguard preemptively hand-waving any criticisms for what they call the modernized character creator and gender selection, because if you don't like it, don't use it. Yet women are criticizing the character creator because they don't feel represented by it. And now somehow they're a part of the angry, edgy gamer crowd? I think that the worst part of all of this is how often I see individuals or groups being blamed. No, it's the men that are spreading the hate. No, it's the liberal women that are ruining games. No, it's white privilege. No, it's minorities taking undeserved jobs. No, it's the straights. No, it's the gays, when in fact all of these issues are just plain old-fashioned corporate greed and corruption. It is consultancy industries that are made and managed by the governments that set the rules. It's large corporations hiring talentless, self-indulgent, bitter people because they need to check a box for tax incentives, using consultancy agencies to supplement their work at a lower rate and then train those self-same talentless employees. Then those employees find their way into leadership roles and narrative positions, taking corporate initiatives for diversity on a ride, using it as their mark to be left on the world, because without identity, their life has no meaning. It's corporations that have cultivated massive audiences, tens of millions of players who don't understand that those players have a limited amount of time and money, less so by the year. And they can't play every single game that's released, but they need to grow their audience. They need more players. Let's go
back. This is true. Gamers do have less time and less money. The economy has changed. You know, things are not like it was where game studios had our full attention during COVID because everybody was home. Everybody was gaming. Everyone was working from home and stuff like that. We were all just trying to be safe, and we all kind of huddled in, and obviously the content creation space blew up. A lot of us were making good money during that time because everybody was available and they were able to invest their budgets in that. But now that we're back to work and we're back, you know, in sort of a sense of normalcy here, you know, we do have less time, so we're not going to play certain shovelware, you know, DEI forced in games. You know, we're gonna look for the really good stuff. Yeah, and that's not even getting into the unfinished and unpolished games, you know, that are full
They
price.
can't play every single game that's released, but they need to grow their audience. They need more players.
They need more money. Have to keep
so they
growing.
look to trends in other media. And they think, hey, you know what? My ultra-masculine franchise about war and loss, you know what that needs? It needs a female lead to take the place of beloved male characters in a story about friendship and rainbows. That'll draw in the new demographics. We'll make posts on social media talking about how inclusive we are. We'll latch ourselves onto social causes, and then we will minimize and remove all of those elements when we go to sell it in a different
hang on.
Causes, and then we will minimize and remove all of those elements when we go to sell it in a different country that doesn't share those values.
That phrase he just said, you don't even know how true that is. Here we go. How does Marvel market their movies in different countries, right? Let's look at Black Panther specifically. Trying to find it. I can't find it for some reason. Dang it. Usually I can find this like right away. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just not finding it. Yeah, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. So you want to talk about the idea here that that he was just speaking on, that when you market your game to a country that doesn't share those values, like for example how China is a little racist, all right? They don't like their African American characters. So what do? You have your movie poster here in the States where it's like, oh, look at this. It's Chadwick Boseman, an African American character, or an African Wakandan character, right? That is the key front and center focus. But when we market this game in China or Japan or what have you, we throw the mask on for the poster. And they do this with every movie. And everyone does this, especially when they're trying to evoke certain values from a certain audience. If they have a female-led movie, for example, in other countries, they will put a male character front and center, and then they'll sideline the female character. Even if it's like Tomb Raider or something like that, they will just gradually make those changes. So I don't know. I'm not able to like pull up too many examples here. I thought it'd be, but yeah, I mean, there's different ways that they like lay out characters, and then obviously, they will even like re-edit movies. Like if games have, or if games or movies have any sense of diversity, or any sort of what would you call it, like homosexual or type of content like that doesn't fly in Saudi Arabia or China or stuff like that, and the way that representation is sort of lauded in America. That's why corporations are doing this. They're trying to appeal to the widest audience, but when they don't need to, they'll laser focus, and all of a sudden this game or movie that's really diverse, when you buy it in China, it's completely not diverse. So do they really care about diversity, or do they just care about making money?
To beloved male characters in a story about friendship and rainbows. That'll draw in the new demographics. We'll make posts on social media talking about how inclusive we are. We'll latch ourselves onto social causes, and then we will minimize and remove all of those elements when we go to sell it in a different country that doesn't share those values.
Yeah.
So what's the impact of DEI on gaming? It's performative inclusivity for corporations and governments who have weaponized it to meet financial goals while ignoring the impact on the product or the audience. It's creating poorly executed games, surface-level attempts at diversity that are nothing more than transparent greed, because we know that they don't care, and we see it in broad daylight. It's dividing the people in the gaming community, and it's being co-opted by Twitter engagement farmers and games media, fanning the flames to keep the hatred going. Keep them mad, keep them fighting, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that they stay relevant, and it's the only way that they can make money. It's about suppressing genuine criticism. It's about fragmenting communities. It's promoting ill will and bad ideologies on both sides of the aisle, and ultimately, it's making gaming worse.
Yep.
I think having discussions like these are incredibly important
It is.
and constructive. And I think that's the most important part, is to have constructive conversations around these kind of issues, because I think more times than not, it's much easier to just point at one of these issues and tear it down and never really talk about anything else around it. the deeper meaning, where it comes from, what it's actually doing, what its intentions are, and things like that. And in this case, while I don't think that EA, Activision, Blizzard, Ubisoft, whoever else is going to be watching anything like this, I do think that the smaller studios, or the studios that we've been supporting, the ones that have been out there actually delivering high quality games that are worth our money, that we've been buying, that we've been enjoying, that have seen a ton of success, I do think that they are listening to things like these because they want to continue that success. And in a lot of ways, I think that they're going to be the changing of the old guard. I think that they're going to be taking the place of many of the companies that we see that are leading the industry today.
Yeah,
because
we could see Ubisoft
after a while, if they
other
can't grow their
companies totally collapse
and
over
their
this
games just don't speak
propaganda
to audiences anymore. No, they're going to be running into some problems. Good games win, bad games fail. It's the greatest time to be alive. This is one of the reasons why I said before it's the best time to be a gamer, is because, well, our money, our voting is working. And there's been a ton of games that we've been able to vote on over the last few years, and it's worked. It's worked. You know, I've had a lot of people ask me why I'm so passionate about these kind of topics or why I'm so passionate about gaming. It's just video games, dude. Calm down. I think in a lot of ways the reason why is because I view gaming as one of the last vestiges of an industry in which we can actually have any change happen. We can actually influence that industry. We can protect ourselves. We can protect our favorite hobby because of how young it is. It still is very young. It's not very set in its ways yet. While, yeah, there's a lot of investor money and things like that that are out there, this industry is a little bit more controlled because of, well, how the free market works. If we buy your game, you do well. If we don't buy your game, things aren't going to work out too well.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I've enjoyed all the Gears games, and I think some of the stories have done well, but I do think the new direction that they took was not helpful for the series, and I think E-Day is a way of righting the ship, of bringing it back to what makes Gears of War incredible, which is, you know, Marcus and Dom. I mean, really. And the core crew, you know, maybe Coltrane and Baird and the rest of the gang. I think if there are still stories to tell, like the Pendulum Wars or, you know, what actually happened on Emergence Day, we get to learn why Marcus goes to prison, you know, stuff like that. You know, I think that's a way that you right the ship and recapture your audience and say, hey, this thing that wasn't working, that wasn't selling games, that we thought including more of this was a good thing.
And right now, it's not working out very well for a few companies, Ubisoft being one of them. You know, the message will always be the same for me, and it's just that I genuinely do want more people to be involved in games. I want people to feel like they belong, and like I said earlier in the video, this isn't about hate. This isn't about trying to get people not in video games. This is about making sure that people are represented properly.
Yep.
And this is making sure that people aren't having their identities commoditized simply for the fact that these companies want to try to make more money off of you.
I agree.
And then on top of that, how often we see these...
Think about it. What did Disney do to Finn in Star Wars, right? What did Disney do to Finn? You had an African-American character that could have had a meaningful arc, much like Mace Windu or Lando or someone else, throughout all sorts of movies and entertainment over the years. And they did multiple things. They bowed down to the racists, and they knew that a wider marketed movie would sideline... If they sidelined the black character, they could adapt and attract a wider audience across the world. If they said, hey, main white female protagonist, everyone's going to love this. That obviously sells better than, you know, black stormtrooper converts to force-sensitive potential Jedi. You know, he could have had a really cool arc throughout those 3 movies. But because they changed it, bowing down to multiple things, racism, or better sales worldwide, or just, you know, making dumb changes that don't make sense story-wise. There you go. And games can be powerful. They can be political, you know? Spec Ops lets you understand wars and war crimes and, you know, even genocidal actions. It helps you understand a lot of those things. It does preach a message, but it doesn't belittle you. It doesn't make you feel like shit for, you know, if you were to disagree or agree with said message. You know, liking the Empire in Star Wars doesn't make you a bad person. You know, just because they're the bad guys and they are a stand-in for an evil imperial tyrannical government force, you know, doesn't mean that you support the Nazi party by dressing up as Darth Vader for Halloween. It's symbolism. It's allegory. It's not meant to be the entire point of the film. It's meant to be entertainment. So
these
anyway.
companies and their two-faced tactics, trying to talk about how they care about you, how they want to represent you, but the minute that they go to sell their game in China, Russia, or Saudi Arabia, all of a sudden, well, they forgot about you. Oh, I'm sorry, we left you behind.
Yep.
Like a Home Alone episode, or I guess that was actually a movie. Do they have a TV show? I don't know. Anyway, we have a lot of games to vote on next year. I've been looking at the list of games that we have, and it's staggering. I thought that this year was stacked. Next year, it looks insane now. With some of the more recent reveals that we've seen, as well as just, you know, the big titles that we already knew were coming next year, it's going to be a crazy year. I'm going to be struggling to find the time. You're going to be struggling to find the time. So make sure you're picking wisely. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys take the root message to heart and understand that it's not necessarily DEI is the devil. It's just that the way that it's being implemented, how it's being abused, and how it's being corrupted is the issue. So
there's more nuance
against
to
those
it.
And the things that actually matter. That's the real point of this discussion. And instead of putting all of our focus on a single game developer or a journalist or something like that, well, I think it's really important to bring up the things that they discuss and to criticize those things. I think that in a lot of cases, what we need to be doing is putting most of our focus on the places that actually matters. That's these government programs, because that's where the root of all these issues really is.
Vote.
So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure to share this with your friends, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It'd be kind of crazy if you haven't subscribed already. I guess I'm already at 200,000 or almost at 200,000. I was planning on making a video about 100,000 subs.
197,000.
Well, that didn't happen. So I guess I'll have to figure something out soon. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. Follow me on Twitch if you guys want to catch me live, and I'll check you later. Peace.
Okay, so I subscribed, liked the video. I have a link in the description if you want to watch the video for yourself in its entirety. It's already got 215k views. His channel is almost at 200k subscribers. And we can look here and see that the title of the video, right now, it's The Real Impact of DEI in Gaming, which YouTubers will do this. I've done this before myself. You'll change the title of the video multiple times. So at first it was DEI and its destructive influence on gaming. An honest look at DEI in gaming, the real impact of DEI in gaming. And obviously his video has trended really well over time. It's only like 3 days old. So yeah, I think it's a really successful video that really gets into the nitty-gritty of the issue. And I think it's an important and nuanced discussion. It's not simple. It's not clear-cut, black and white, where it's like DEI good or DEI bad, right? There's obviously good implementations that we talked about, like Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, Star Wars, you know, you name it. There have been good adaptations of diversity that has been meaningful and important and well done. And there have been other ones like Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, Concord, Star Wars The Acolyte, where they have just sort of shelled it out and done the worst shovelware, you know, just absolute disrespect to those people, and just marketed it as a sales attempt or a tax write-off or just diversity for the sake of it, not for actual narrative or character development. If you guys don't have any last questions or comments, we will wrap up this live react here. I want to thank you all for jumping in. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think in the comments. Keep all the discussions respectful of myself and each other. Make sure that you're not saying anything rude or insulting. You can talk about the issue and agree or disagree without, you know, coming to blows and being offensive towards each other. We want to keep conversations both constructive and appropriate. So, And I know it's a very divisive, intense issue. It's not an easy one to sit down and talk about, and I know that people will agree and disagree on this issue, but I would ask that you need to just sort of view this issue and this discussion and this video in its full and complete context, and not to see things that are sort of clipped out of context. It's important to sit down and have these discussions and clarify things and have these deep discussions where we can hash things out and figure out how we want things to go moving forward. So let me see. I don't know if anyone's live over on Twitch, 'cause I don't really have much of a presence over there anymore, but I don't really see anyone to raid right now. But once again, I want to thank you all for watching. Take care, be safe. Don't forget to like the video. Check out Legendary Drops' channel if you're interested in seeing more videos from him. I think he had a really good take on this, and I think he got in and got very nuanced and analytical on the topic, and so I think that was important and really well done. So I hope you enjoyed this. We'll try to do more React content in the future. I just think this one was too important to ignore. Don't forget to get out there and vote before the elections are over here in the States. Take care, be safe, have a good night or day. Bye.